to say, yes, I'll work on 5 million hectares, 10 million hectares, 100 million hectares, but tangibly, what is that? That's a huge amount of land. And for the skeptics in the audience who think, well, really, are these headline commodities going to change the way we manage land in Africa? I mean, just look at this slide behind us. So rubber, cocoa, shea, oil palm, cashew, coffee. All of Africa's coffee could be grown in Djibouti. All of Africa's rubber could be grown in the Gambia. All of Africa's cocoa in Togo. All of Africa's cashew in Lesotho. And all of Africa's oil palm in Burundi and Rwanda. Now, shea does stand out a bit there because it's a massive extent. It's the largest covering tree commodity, commercial tree commodity, and a justifiable focus for the case study this afternoon. It is at a much lower density, obviously, than a lot of the cultivated. Everything else is cultivated. Shea is naturally regenerated. So as we look at these cross-cultural, cross-ministerial, cross-sectoral, cross-disciplinary disconnects, it's very heartening, Dora, and also Eric, I'm not sure where Eric is, that, the bank is kind of leading the way, because how many studies do you see where the World Bank agricultural practice and the World Bank environment practice actually come together and co-invest and organize together? So let's give a round of applause to our World Bank colleagues. And so commodities, well, are those commodities listed up there really going to change the way we manage land use in Africa? How serious is it when all of those commodities put together, except shea, is less than 2% of the land area, and shea is less than 3%? So then surely it must be the staple commodities, the ones that we really look to, cassava, wheat, maize, sweet potato, rice, and potato. But again, look at just how small those areas of those cultivated crops are. And yet we want to manage this huge landscape called Africa through just the agricultural lens. So it is going to be those linkages between agriculture and forestry and commodities and water and wetlands. And the two problem childs for any government anywhere in the world, in Africa, are wetlands and forest. These things are incredibly valuable, incredibly useful, but just not remunerative. And so the pressures to convert those are always present, ever present. A hectare of humid tropical forest might be worth $10,000. How much does the government get the revenue from that? When the governments own 75, 80% of the wetlands and forests in Africa, they're not getting the income. The pressure to convert those to other land uses is always there. And then we've got these degraded states. And of course the answer is land restoration. But how much is it going to cost us per hectare? $10, $50, $200, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000? And if it's going to cost somewhere between $500 and $5,000 a hectare, it's very easy to pledge 10 million hectares, but much harder to write a check for $50 billion to make sure that we're covering that. And all of this is against the challenge and the finance. And the innovative financing instruments that we've been working with, typically the investors say, well, agriculture, particularly in Africa, it's too risky, it's not very remunerative, it's a bit complex, there's just too many unknown risks, we're not interested. And the job of everyone in this room is to de-risk those enterprises and options and land use management options, because that will bring in the finance. And it's not going to be, we're an organization that is predominantly funded by grants. It's not going to be overseas development assistance. Eric was lamenting, the diversion in the slide and the contraction of ODA. For every single dollar of ODA, there's $3 of remittances to developing countries. There's $6 of foreign direct investment. There's $24 of domestic private sector spend and $35 of national government expenditure. And moreover, $1,000 of private capital waiting to be mobilized. So let's use that single dollar, those funds we can get from the World Bank, to leverage these other sources to really make a change in our landscapes. Because with climate change, the report that came out 2 days ago, looking at the consequences of the rise being the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees is so frightening. It's really, really, and then people are talking about, well, it won't just be the 2-degree world, and then it's going to end up being a 4-degree world. Well, if we end up with a 4-degree world, we're going to end up with a 4-letter outcome. And it's the interest of everyone in this room to use not just tree commodities, not just the agricultural practices, but wise land use and stewardship. And so connecting the policies at national or international, national, local, and individual people's decisions will be what's changed that. And we've got 3 breakout groups, fantastic ones, to do that. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me this afternoon. My job was just to light the touch paper like a firework and walk away. But thank you very much for listening. Please do stay to the end. I understand there's 12 flavors of free ice cream that are going to be circulated, so get ready for those and look forward to the contributions of everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tony Simons. You really challenged us, and I'm sure everyone is challenged in the room. So we will use the opportunity of the breakout sessions to do our own deep dive as individuals, contributing to what we have done as findings from a study. So before we go to the study, permit us to do a very short quiz. It's a really cool one, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy learning while testing out your knowledge on agriculture-forest nexus, as well as some of the drivers of the issues pertaining to landscape restoration.
Stand here whilst we do it, yeah?
Okay. So we have to log on to our computers, right?
Yeah, same rules as applied earlier. Hi, everyone. If you go onto slido.com, enter GLF Nairobi, be grateful. We would have done this with making people stand up and jump around if it wasn't for modern technology. So slido.com on any of your devices or computers, GLF Nairobi, and make sure you can see the question above. Hopefully you can. It should be in the polls section.
Is it, there you go, you got it. Okay, perfect. So should we start now? Please, if you can provide your answers, let me do mine quickly. We're hoping to devote 10 seconds to each question, so.
Are you going to give them the correct answer?
Okay. So, of course, this was on the GLF website. It was just an icebreaker. Of course, the focus is on putting people first. And that is what the GLF is pushing towards, that whole landscape restoration question. Next, please. So deforestation is a global challenge despite efforts to plant trees and restore habitats. How much net forest area is lost each year? Okay. Obviously, the answer, should I go ahead? Yeah. The answer is the size of Costa Rica. See, we are all enlightened enough, so let's go on to the next one, please. So what is the biggest driver of deforestation? This is a very easy one. Need not belabor that point. Well, you're right. I mean, timber has its own share, but agriculture is now the main boss when it comes to deforestation. That's what we want to vote, because I'm voting a bit of time to this afternoon. So agriculture is the largest driver of deforestation and forest degradation, but can be a solution too. The biggest driver can also be a solution. That's it. That's another neat one. Thank you. You're very right. Agriculture is a driver, but has all the tools to be a solution too, and we'll explore that this afternoon. So planting trees in the field is a bad idea because trees compete with crops. Okay. See, there was an initial a few truths, but they all switched to false, which is quite comforting because there are few literature that tend to show that trees compete with agro crops. But in the long term, of course, there's always that benefit of trees enhancing productivity, and there's lots of studies to justify that. So next one, tree-based systems or trees on farms can increase farmer income. Okay, so we have a lot of studies that show that trees on farms actually have increased farmer income by 17%. And I hope it doesn't stay at 17%. It needs to edge a little higher to get more farmers to be interested in adopting trees on farms. So, yes. Next one. Wow. Okay. 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 So, actually, the answer is, you finished voting? I'm sure we can have a long debate on this, but the answer is 12%. But it's always been a range. There's some literature that quotes it as 20%, but that's a combination of, but trees actually make up 12%. So forests provide people with many benefits, including food, fuel, and fodder, and construct. How many people worldwide benefit from forests? You said the system is?
It's a bit slow. That's the internet. My apologies.
Okay, let the votes come. Okay. So forests contributing to food, fuel, and fodder has been known to support 1.3 billion people. So 9% got it. But of course, we can always put it as a range, so. But then it's 1.3 billion. How many formal and informal jobs are created by the forest sector worldwide? And the answer is 50 million. And let me add, and counting, because that's pushing up. This is one interesting one. How much is world demand for timber expected to change by 2050? Okay, 8 more seconds. I must believe this is preaching to the choir. Again, the masses got it. It's 400. Oh, I should have waited. It's 400%. Okay, next one. I guess we're about done. Just a few more and we're done. So this is a pretty interesting question on the nature-based solutions adopting green infrastructure. So thanks to forests, New York City's water utility saved billions of dollars in water filtration costs. Is that true or false? All right, they actually did save billions of dollars rather than resort to business as usual infrastructure for water filtration. They resorted to adopting agri-based systems, and instead of hard infrastructure, they were able to reduce, or they were able to save themselves that much money by virtue of relying on forests. So yes, that is true. And this one, yours to tell us, but infrastructure like seawalls and levees is always more effective at preventing coastal erosion than mangrove forest. Okay, So 4% of us say it's false, and I'll be very interested in learning the reasoning behind the choice of false. But indeed, mangrove forests have been proven to be very effective in protecting coastal regions. And there are lots of studies, both by the bank and outside, to justify this. So forests are strictly an environmental concern and are not part of sustainable development goals. It's just an environmental concern. Sustainable development goals, are they interlinked? Preaching to the choir, 100%, you're right, it's obviously false. Of course, forests rests its head in a series of the SDG goals, without a doubt. One interesting question. So forests have contributed to lifting 11% of people out of poverty, contributing about 22% of their household income. Is this true? Or this could be false in some sense? Again, for the ones who feel it's false, please, parklands are being converted into fuel wood because of pressure for livelihoods, but then there is room for restoration. There is room for adopting innovative research and development that will support expansion of shea in the landscape. So I hope that during your discussions, you hint out or bring out some of the lessons that somewhat reflect the pointers of is shea an invisible management system? Is it a minor wild forest product, or it's one that can actually be regenerated using innovative technology? And it's been found that instead of shea being seen as a wild plant, it can actually, using the right mechanisms, be promoted, be propagated. So hopefully your discussions would bring those pointers out. And very quickly, to be able to take the discussion on shea, looking at the shea parklands into consideration, or the shea agroforest parkland, there possibly need to be some kind of rebranding, not see it as a minor wild harvested product, but one that can be propagated using the right technology, using the right systems. There is a need to address the threat of tree removal for crop cultivation and agriculture, from crop cultivation and agricultural chemicals. There's a need for land reform. That is an obvious fact. And an adoption of female-oriented technologies for the processing of the shea commodity will be viable. And as we're doing now, there need to be more regional discussions, as we're having now, to tease out practical, viable recommendations that can be adopted in the restoration of this very sensitive landscape. I would have loved to run you through the other 5 commodities, but according to Liz, my time is exhausted. So if you give me 3 minutes, 3 quick minutes, I will do a quick run through. And as I have mentioned to you, having finished the brief on shea, we've looked at cocoa and coffee as key drivers of both reforestation and deforestation. And I hope that that sensitive sentence becomes something that you can look into. These commodities are primarily seen as agroforestry systems, but for some reason, there's a gradual shift back to sun-loving species, which will be to the disadvantage of adoption of agroforestry systems. So would you have any examples where shade-loving commodities for coffee and cocoa have been strongly adopted? And what are the key intricate reasons for the adoption versus the switch to sun-loving species, which will be to the discredit of agroforest systems? Quickly to the next commodity, silvopastoral systems. I'm very happy to have gleaned this experience from Latin America. We have known that in that system, there has been a very beautiful combination of trees into the silvopastoral areas, which at the end of the day has increased productivity of the pasture, has increased productivity of milk, has increased meat production, and has also enhanced, supported reduction of diseases to a good extent. So there is room for adoption of these systems in the Sahel belt, where there seems to be a large population of livestock. Working on Sudan, Sudan only has 40 million people. The population of livestock is over 100 million. So how do they balance the large livestock population with the human needs and the agricultural productivity question? And let me quickly take you to Brazil for soy. Soy is also one of the key drivers for deforestation in the in the Brazil region. But due to sustained support both from the government, from the private sector, there's been that interest in weaning away from outright deforestation to adoption of challenging pledges that are being adhered to. And so the soy moratorium that has been adopted in Brazil has seen quite significant results. But then there's always the question of, has it been 100% successful, or there's room for improvement? And I probably may not have the opportunity to discuss this further, but this is to let you know that the BSM, and I'll be sharing the report, the Brazilian soy moratorium has done a good job in identifying the successes of this commodity as it pertains to reducing deforestation in the Brazil region. Let me skip beef and quickly touch on palm oil, and then we will go into our breakout sessions. I think I'm eating your time, right? Okay. So quickly to let you know that oil palm, and I'm touching on it because it has relevance for East Asia and for Africa. There are areas where there's increasing adoption or increasing room for propagation of palm oil. And the point here is that, let me quickly hint at these, that there are a few key lessons that have been generated from Indonesia's example that will have relevance for increased adoption of palm oil in Africa. And I would believe that although these examples have not been, in some cases, the best, they have actually been able to generate recommendations that can be taken up when the need for scale-up in our part of the world comes into being. And quickly, small-scale production models have been recommended as viable. Land and supply chain taxation models, to some extent, can be looked into. Environmental and social safeguards ought to be factored deeply. Legal framework for jurisdictional certification and sourcing is another key area of consideration. And then jurisdictional sourcing. That is one key area. And the mechanisms for finding low-emission development within the context of this commodity is crucial. So permit me to conclude at this stage and allow the breakout sessions to happen so that you can do your own more of a deeper dive on some of the key messages that have been generated from this with a focus on the Sahel Belt. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dora, for a wonderful presentation. Really, really enlightening and exciting, actually. In the interest of time, we wouldn't go into the group work. That's a suggestion we're bringing up, because we would want to have more, broad discussion with everyone at the same time. So what we'll do is alter the schedule a little bit, and we'll call up our panelists straight away, and then get the response from the panelists, and then we'll go back to the floor for questions and a broad discussion for everyone. Yeah? Thank you. So Frank Place, can you please come up? Nora, Braumi, can you please come up, please? And Irene Ojok. I saw Irene, she was sitting somewhere here. Did you want to call up?
Oh, yeah. No? Yes, it's Miriam. Yeah.
Yeah, Miriam. Yeah. Is Miriam? Miriam?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please come up, please? And Salina. Yeah. Can you please come up? Yeah. Okay. No, but you have to just sit here. Just sit. It's fine. Yeah. So as Miriam and Salina come up, I'll introduce very briefly our panelists who would respond. Thank you. Yeah. So Frank Place works for IFPRI and also leads a program, is a director of a program on institutions, policies, institutions, and markets within the CGIAR, and has tons and tons of experience on these issues, 30 years at least. And he's worked with eCraft 20 years of that time as well. So, and very good experience in the Sahel and in Africa broadly. Nora Bramuni works for FAO, is a senior policy officer at FAO, based in Accra, in Ghana. And she's more responsible, most of her work is on drylands, with several projects that she's doing there. And she's been very much hands-on on the Great Green Wall program. And Nora is very passionate about involving local people and believes that they have the capability to do it if we involve them rightly. Irene works for World Vision International, and her role is an environment and climate advisor there, and she also does a lot of work on FMNR, actually. My knowledge of her is more of an FMNR specialist, actually. And then we have Miriam, who was going to lead the group discussions that we're going to have. And Miriam is a senior development specialist at IFC with a lot of interest and experience on the subject as well. Salina Abraham is a youth coordinator for GLF. They had a very exciting few days already, and really good work, and really trying to move, get youth more involved, and bring them to contribute to the broader debate that we are having. Thank you very much for accepting to come on board. What we would like to do at this point is just to give you 2-3 minutes just to reflect on what you've heard, and just make a few response statements about this. If you keep it short, fine for us. So please just have a go. We'd like to go with in the order in which I presented the panelists. So Frank, 1, 2, 3 minutes is fine.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll just say a few things. Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. No, let me reflect a little bit on some of the things that were mentioned here by both Tony and by Dora. One of the things that I find interesting, I used to, as Peter said, I worked for a long time in ICRAF, and I spoke to people who understood the issues that we need multiple wins, and it's not about trade-offs so much. We have to fight. We want to integrate. We want to try to integrate NRM for the good of productivity and for long-run sustainability. It's not one or the other. Now that I've kind of shifted and I go to many other meetings and with wearing different hats from IFPRI side, I don't see that mindset is there really. I think still people see things as a trade-off. And I think one of the things I just want to, just maybe one of the kind of issues I'd like to say is that actually, if we think about trees and these commodities, actually they're part of the intensification process. It's not that we're trying to intensify and then also offset that intensification process through trees and better stewardship of the forest, but they're really part of that process. So, we've heard about some of the commodities here that the growing of them and diversifies and grows income. Many other trees promote intensification through providing high-quality feeds for the livestock, which is a huge sector and often underappreciated in Africa, especially in some of these areas we're talking about. And of course, the trees also can enrich the soils in many, many different kinds of ways to help promote the crops that farmers grow. So it's really a tool of intensification. And of course, it's the right tree for the right places. It's, you're not going to just flood the area with trees, but I think it's part of it's really part of the process, and I don't think that's really on the mindset of people when the meetings I go to. And so another thing I wanted to mention, Tony did mention the compartmentalization. We tend, even within our organizations, we chop things up, and so some unit works on this and some unit works on that, and we really have to work together. And I've always kind of been in a position before where I was just complaining about that, and now actually I'm in a position where I better do something about it. So I'm going to really try to see if I can make that happen. The last point is really on tenure that was mentioned, and when we talk about tenure, we often just think about land tenure, but actually tree tenure is very important. It's a separate and very complex issue, and I'm just going to make that point because one of the discussion forums in the next hour is going to be some interesting papers on tree tenure, so you may want to participate. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Frank. I knew you were going to talk about tenure, so thank you very much. Very insightful. Nora, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, I will touch the issue, of course, of branding restoration. So restoration of the degraded areas and the decline in sheep parklands, landscapes in these 21 countries, including, of course, the Sahel, which is also the heart or the action of the Great Green Wall is going on. And I think we need to think about this restoration from the seed, from the land to the market, to the end product, not just looking at the planting or at the sustainable management of the land without looking at the market, access for communities to the market. Second, the addressing the root causes under, let's say, behind degradation of these landscapes, which are either the need for firewood, the need for crops, people, of course, put in fire in order to clear land and agriculture and many things. So, and to do that, I think putting the communities at the heart of this restoration of these landscapes is important. Putting them at the heart means that asking them and making sure to reply to their needs of these landscapes, because communities, of course, need the crop, let's say need the shea to market outside, you know, to get a living, also for food, but they need other things. They need firewood, they need grass to feed their animals, and they need different things. So I think we need to look at the restoration, including involving the diversity of species to bring the diversity of the products that are needed and also building resilience of the community. So I think we need to look at that. And the third point I think I would like to touch, sometimes we are looking at restoration just for like thinking about the planting, but I think we need also to think about better managing the land, you know, to increase, of course, the density, but also their management, protecting some areas that are already existing. And this can be done only with the support of the technical assistance of institutions and research that can help. And moreover, when planting, I think it's also important to build up the producer associations around these landscapes to help, from one side, managing better the land, restoring them, but also access to market. And this is, for example, what one of the facilities that exist, like the Forest and Farm Facility, has been really pushing the support of the let's say, enhancing and building capacity of producer associations from the management side, from the business side, to also to get the market access. And this is, for example, I think there will be an event just after this where we will have more maybe insights and lessons on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nora. I think one of the points that you made, I think it's the whole resilience part of the storyline, which I think it's extremely useful. And going back to your passion on producer associations, I think it's an extremely useful thing. So there were other things, but I think this came out very, very strongly. Thank you very much. And we now call on Irene, please.
Okay, just to follow up on what my colleague has just talked about, I'm looking at the enabling environment for these opportunities to thrive. Are we finding the private sector getting fair space to work? Are the communities still at the driving seat? Because sometimes when the opportunities like shea are really prime in an area, there are potential for brokers to actually exploit the producers, and that's why sometimes you find a very potential opportunity put into charcoal burning, because the brokers or the people who are middlemen in between here who do not allow the actual poor farmers who need to get maximum output out of what they do, empowered through it. So then their livelihoods are threatened and they go back to destroying the environment. So communities as drivers, how is the enabling environment like, so that every player finds an opportunity to utilize the systems well, so that everyone lives empowered. I'm looking at the role of culture and indigenous knowledge. How have we used culture to inform our implementation approaches as development partners, even as we work with these communities to support restoration or to support the interventions we bring on board. Sometimes we do this in a way that is very fast, and so we don't have time to understand communities, understand why they do what they do, and that has led to so many mistakes that have happened in the course of our implementation. So it would be good to reflect on what happens and why they do what they do, and that should actually inform how science interprets or science fits with indigenous knowledge. What is the role of culture? When women are in a place where they cannot benefit from tree products, what exactly happens then when we are actually working with them in restoration efforts? Because they can do it, but then when the time for reaping the benefits come, they actually put aside. So then was it really worth the investment? Then maybe just the last thing is on the aspect that has been talked about since morning, where we are looking at livelihoods as one of the key opportunities that are going to sit at the center of